I finally got around to reading Ciaphas Cain for the Emperor, which is the first book in the series. This is another Warhammer book, but it is so funny. And because it's the first book in the series, you kind of get a lot of the context for it. Like, if any of the races are introduced, you kind of get their background, you get their language, you get how they look. So I feel like you don't need any background in Warhammer to get into this book. This is not horror. This is humor. And like, I guess kind of adventure, kind of political intrigue, but like it's humor. Like, it's such dry humor that's just so funny, and there's like funny situations. And the main character, you know, unreliable narrator, there's like 3 or 4 narrators. I think there's 4. There's Ciaphas Cain himself, there's the Inquisitor, who he becomes friends with. Whatever. There is a historian who kind of hates Ciaphas Cain and is very matter-of-fact about the way he tells the story. And then there's a general who the Inquisitor, who's like kind of the main narrator, she hates the general, who's a woman, just for perspective. But I think it's partially jealousy, but she keeps prefacing all of the sections written by the general with, "I am so sorry for anyone who speaks this language. This is so horribly written. I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but it's the only first-hand account that I have, so I have to. I'm so sorry." Like, every single time the general writes, like, there's that preface by the Inquisitor. I think it's the perfect example of like fake it till you make it. Bullshitting will get you anywhere. I think my favorite line from the book was the slapdash functionalism of orc habitations. You know, I've been reading a lot of orc books, and the idea of just the practicality of, but also like the last minute planning of orc cities, that just made me so happy. Also, there was a reference to what we saw in Oubliette, an earlier book that I have a video on, with like power struggles of a planetary governor. You get an introduction to the Tau, who are another race in Warhammer. There's great architectural descriptions, especially of Tau architecture in this. It's a lot of curved surfaces, which I love. I love really natural forms in architecture. Also, there's these, like, my note just says Munchie Boys. I'm gonna make a note of what they actually are. But they're kind of silly. Like, they're weird, but they're kind of like, I don't really like them, but my boyfriend seems really invested in them, and I'm trying to figure out why. And then of course they drink tea, because this is a British world, and of course they always drink tea. Like, I should have known. I'm going to be picking up where we left off with Ciaphas Cain, specifically the book Caves of Ice. It starts with a brief summary of the last book's plot. He's definitely a skilled swordsman, as well as a couple other skills like underground navigation. He recognizes himself as a symbol of inspiration rather than just a good soldier. He's also over 200 years old, which I think this was the first time that we'd really known that. I also love all of the other narrators in the book. They each have such a clear personality and difference in writing style. Also, I love that it's not just world building, but world history building, like the planet's development, like literally geological formations, like Arpangea, but they would like talk about the different layers of the planet. Also, there's the idea of the Necrons versus the Orcs versus the Imperium, which is crazy. It also ends with a cute date, so I absolutely love that for him. Like, that's a good ending. The next book in the Ciaphas Cain series is called The Traitor's Hand. The Inquisitor, who's the main book series narrator, still hates Janet Sula's writing style, and every single entry of hers is prefaced also by like how much the Inquisitor hates her. And every single one is just so funny. The book has epic feminism, just like the one thing I didn't expect about Warhammer, since it seems like a male dominated like field or interest, is that all of the books are so incredibly feminist with such incredible gender equality, and I really don't know why that isn't emphasized more in the way that Warhammer presents itself. Also, Ciaphas Cain has fake fingers, and I think that's mentioned maybe 20 times in this book. He really likes salamandered vehicles. Also, there's a Slanesh demon host, like one of the ones from the Orc books that the Mechis created. You might remember one of my earlier videos. There are confinement symbols like the ones from Oubliette. There's an unexpectedly sexy navigator. I just love that he had to point that out. Cataclysms. We love a remote meeting. Hashtag Warhammer sponsored by Zoom. When he feels his palms itching, that's a bad thing. I've heard that it could be because he's like almost a psyker or like a minor psyker, like his luck is also maybe a sign that he is, but I don't think it's confirmed. And then my favorite part of the book was one of the chapters is prefaced with a quote that says, "Well, that was unexpected." And it was the last words of the Chaos War Master, Varen the Undefeatable, because he was defeated. I don't know, that gave me some hee-hee. He also has a tea addiction, the tanner that he drinks. Also, have this thought a lot, but Slanesh is a gender fluid icon and I'm obsessed. And it had a very, very satisfying ending. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, you'll have to read it, but highly recommend this book. It was good. The next book in the Ciaphas Cain series is called Death or Glory. It's about orcs. Also, a planet that's mentioned in the beginning of the book is a planet that has sky whales. And I'm going to need a sky whale because those sound so cute. They're flying whales and they explain how they work. It's amazing. Also, while it's not necessary, I'm happy that I read all of the orc books before this book because I have a lot of insider knowledge that makes this book more fun. This also takes place probably back when he was younger because women are described in such a sus way throughout the book. Also, priests are described as emperor botherers, which just makes me so happy. Also, the female tech priest is amazing. She is so peppy and cute, and I love her. There's also a orc war boss duel that was more epic than any of the Chaos Marines. I don't know, I loved this one. Duty Calls was a great Ciaphas Cain book. In the timeline, this book comes after Caves of Ice. The Traitor's Hand and Death or Glory seem to come before the first two. Oh my god, Luna. Sorry. Before the first two, and then Duty Calls is some kind of background information. Jurgen is the best character and he is an incredible aide. I wish everyone could be as skilled as him. I just made a note that says, from power armor to ball gown, Amberly Vale is iconic. I stand by that. Battle Sisters. One of the things that's mentioned, I believe it's in the power armor. Is it power armor or the ships? They have the idea of inertia dampers, and that is such a cool idea. The idea that you're going so fast that you have to come up with a system to stop yourself from being affected by G-force. That's really cool. Also, Like a Phoenix on the Wing is Janet Sula's account of everything, and it's yet again called terrible in this book. I don't think her writing is that terrible. She's definitely very enthusiastic and loves Ciaphas Cain to an irrational degree, but she can't really be faulted for that. Also, the fact that power armor has a dermal interface is like so cool. The fact that it literally connects to your skin to like, I don't know, like sense how you're doing. Like, I don't know, I'm freaking out. Also, the description of the inside of power armor with like the sweat and other smells that accumulates is like such a striking like olfactory sensation. Sorry, Hamish is biting my foot. Also, the town's name is Conan Doyle, which has to be a Sherlock Holmes joke. It's a British thing, and then, you know, the series is British. And also, Cain's dueling instructor was Cyrano de Bergerac, named after the remarkable duelist who had a play written about him. Like, whoever, like, I guess the mindset that he was in when he wrote this book was just funny, but there's a lot more interior references. And don't forget, Cain does have augmented fingers because once again we are reminded of that. It's getting so annoying. Cain's last stand was so cute. He's teaching cadets, and his interactions with younger people is just so funny because the Commissar cadets are psychopaths and Cain is teaching them in the field. Also, just a note, because there's so many repetitive definitions of words, you can literally pick up any of the Cain novels with only mild timeline confusion. I wouldn't recommend it, but technically you could. Also, he has a lot of trauma, and I think that his fixation on his augmented fingers are because of his PTSD related to Necrons and his experience with them. I liked his definitions of like inconsiderate timing on attacks during meals. That feels like a very Hobbit thing to do, and so I just appreciated that. We also love the Scottish Guardsman. Also, Felicia was the cute tech priest from the previous novel, and she appears again. I kind of hate that she's like become less human, because I feel like that was kind of an interesting point, that she was a tech priest who was more human, but she still keeps a lot of her personality, so I guess that's okay. Also, the Psychers trippy as fuck. I love them. Cain's Last Stand is a reference to his breaking the dam on the planet Perlia in the previous novel. So far this book takes the most backstory to understand. You know how some of them come back with references to previous books, but this one is almost entirely connected to the previous book. Also, Catan are star gods that the Atari had around at the beginning of time. I love that name, I love the concept, it's amazing. Also, if Warhammer had been an American creation, we would have armed the 5-year-olds among the commissariat group. They make a note that they don't arm the 5-year-olds in the training camps, but like, you know that if it was America, we would have been. Also, the power armor in the books seem a lot more graceful than the Blood Angels make it seem in the visual media. I always thought that power armor was kind of like clunky, and in a lot of the TV shows that are like animated, it seems very difficult to move in, but in the books it's described as like helping you move, so you're a lot more graceful and a lot more powerful. I kind of like that depiction of it. Also, Cain shows that he's a genuinely nice person in this book, which is incredibly sad when it happens. The Emperor's Finest is a really intense book. It appears right after Cain left the Necron tomb world, which is mentioned in other books, but this is where you really hear about it. He went from a warp portal to a Necron ship and then was rescued by Space Marines, if I'm understanding correctly. And also the book picks up right after he's lost his fingers and he's in the med bay. There's a really annoying governor's daughter. The 12th Valhallan is his first troop. And young Cain underestimates women and acts like your standard nice guy. This is when he was younger, because again, like most of the other books depict him as having PTSD and having augmented fingers, and so this is right after it happened, and it's all like very new. A lot of the descriptions and definitions are repeated every book, which can get very annoying, but I'm sure it'd be more useful to people who aren't listening to the books back to back. I was listening to the books one after the other, so I'm definitely hearing the repetitions more than if I was like picking it up a year later. There's a beautiful training montage in this book. It's like, it made me actually emotional, which is so silly because it's a Warhammer book, but I actually really loved that scene. There's also miscommunication leading to almost permanent consequences. Things get worse and worse, very comedy of errors. Murphy's Law, everything that can go wrong does go wrong, but there's a very satisfying wrap-up, which makes it an incredibly satisfying book. The Greater Good was another installment of the Ciaphas Cain series, and it mostly centered around the collaboration between the Tau Empire and the Imperium. And I thought that it was the most strategic of the books so far. It focused a lot on wartime strategy and specifically the kinds of strategy that you might actually engage in while playing Warhammer. There was a lot of specific unit listings and specific like equipment listings, and like equipment has been mentioned throughout the whole series, where it's like, what gun are they using? Why are they using the gun? How much damage does the gun do? All of that. But I think that in this book, it was also like, how would the Imperium and the Tau communicate? What sort of diplomacy is done between them? Like, that kind of stuff was, I think, clearer in this. Also, it was like, talking about the specific colors of each division. So if you're a painter, this is like a kind of good reference for specific armies. It was also about the collaboration between the Tau and the Imperium against the Tyranids. So there was a lot of like Tyranid specifics in this, that kind of stuff. I mean, I thought it was a good book, but it really is just kind of a continuation of the Cain series as like quintessentially Cain. I didn't find this as funny as some of the other books. I didn't find the story as interesting as some of the other books, but I think this was like more of a strategy and specific unit kind of compendium as opposed to like a comedic or like interesting story. So yeah, I mean, obviously continue reading the Cain Chronicles, but this was not personally my favorite book in the series. The Devil You Know is a very classic Ciaphas Cain audiobook. It is audio theater for the mind. I mean, if you're listening to the audiobook, which I highly recommend. So a lot of it is these experiencing the sounds and atmosphere that you would if you were there with him, which I love. Great sound effects. Jurgen sounds kind of weird. It's a classic Cain plot, and it's a one-shot kind of short story. I feel like with most of the Ciaphas Cain books, you don't get all of the sound effects, you don't get all of the kind of surround sound experience of his quests, but I feel like with the short story, they really put a lot of production effort into everything surrounding the plot. So I think it was worth a read. I definitely kind of listen to it after you read the other Ciaphas Cain books, because there's a lot of like context throwbacks that you might be missing if you don't read all the Ciaphas Cain books first, or at least like a couple of them. But I do recommend that you listen to it.